and welcome to this episode of John's Motorcycle Rescue and Review. Today, I'm going to be showing you guys how to service a Honda CB500F and CB500R. The specific bike I'm working on is a 2016 model. I'll give a comprehensive list of all the years and models of CB500 that this is appropriate for in the description section below. In this video, we're going to show you how to check the air filter on the bike. I'll also show you how to change the oil and filter in this motorcycle. We'll inspect the tires on the motorcycle. We'll inspect the suspension on the motorcycle. We'll check the health of the charging system on this motorcycle as well. We'll also check the functionality of the cooling system on the bike. We'll make sure that all of our lights function as they should. We'll look at the throttle setting, make sure that the throttle tension is set properly. We'll look at the clutch tension on the bike and make sure that's set properly. We'll also check the chain tension on the bike to make sure that that is within spec. As I go through these procedures, I will try to list all of the tools that I used. Once I go through this process, I know that this bike is safe to ride, it's safe to get out on the road and enjoy, and that's really my goal. If you like great motorcycle related content and you want to help support this channel, you might want to consider becoming a member. Depending on the level of membership, members get additional bonus features such as early access to new videos and bonus content on this channel. And your support will help me continue to make good quality motorcycle content for you to enjoy. All right, enough talk. Let's get to work. The first thing we want to look at here is the front wheel and the front suspension. I'm going to start by looking at the tire. I'm going to look at the tread depth on this tire. I'm also going to inspect the valve stem for any dry rot and the sidewalls for any dry rot. My tread depth on this front tire is 4/32. These tires look to be in good condition. I don't see any dry rot. I don't see any uneven wear. And we'll check the tire pressure here. It should be at 36 PSI on this motorcycle. And that is right where it's at. I set that earlier today. The next thing we'll look at is the front brakes. I have checked the functionality of these brakes when I rode the bike. They stop well, they have very good modulation on them. There's no shimmies in the brakes under braking. And I measured my brake pad thickness earlier today, and those were at 5/32. So these brake pads are almost new. That's a great sign. The next thing we'll look at here is the front suspension. What we're looking for here is any weepage, any fork seal weepage. These are clean, there's no dings in these, there's no rust on these, and so these look to be in very good condition. To inspect the front brake fluid level, we set the bike in a level position, and that looks to be excellent. That's right where it should be. In these types of master cylinders, the brake fluid actually looks a little bit darker than it is. We're going to do the same checks in the rear of the bike. Looking at the tire, I don't see any dry rot on the tire at all. I've inspected the valve stem for any dry rot cracks. That looks really good. The tread depth on my rear tires is 5/32, and the pad thickness on my rear brake pads is also at 5/32. I'll check the tire pressure now. The tire pressure should be at 42 PSI on this rear tire. And that is right where it needs to be. Setting the bike upright, the brake fluid level in the rear master cylinder is where it should be. While we're at the back of the bike, we want to check the rear shock and make sure that there are no oil leaks or drips coming off of that, and that looks to be fine. I don't see any drips or leaks on the shock. The next system we'll check is the cooling system on the bike, and the first thing that we want to do is look at the level of the coolant in the coolant overflow tank. That is located just in front of the rear shock and towards the underside of the bike. You want to look at this level when the bike is fully up to temperature. I set the bike upright and I shake it back and forth a little bit, and then you can see the coolant sloshing in the tank a little bit, and that makes the level easier to read. This is just a little bit above the full line when the bike is fully up to temperature, and I'm okay with that. The next part of the cooling system that we'll check is the operation of the cooling fan. Once the bike is up to temperature, you want to check and see that the cooling fan turns on and then turns back off again once the bike is fully warmed up. The cooling fan on this bike functions as it should. The next thing we'll check is the battery health on the bike, and after the bike has sat overnight, I like to test the voltage on the battery itself. This one measures 12.6 volts. That's right within the acceptable range. You definitely want the voltage to be above 12 volts after the bike is sat overnight. On a healthy system, the charging voltage is usually between 14 and 15 volts while the bike is running and fully up to temperature. This one is 14.27 volts. That is perfect. While we have the seat removed on the bike, it's a great time to check the air filter. And to do this job, we first need to remove the battery. That requires a 10mm socket. It's always a good thing to remember to remove the ground wire first. That is a black or negative terminal. Once the battery is removed, there are 5 JIS screws that need to be removed in order to get the air filter cover off. Once the cover is removed, we have access to the air filter itself, and on the inside of the cover that is secured by 4 more JIS screws. We need to pull those out in order to inspect the cleaning surface of the air filter. Looking through the inside, we can actually see the cleaning surface of the air filter on this bike, and this looks great. So now everything goes back together in the reverse order that we took it apart. Next up, we'll be checking all of the lights and the horn on the motorcycle. Here, I'm checking the high and low beams. I'm also checking the running lights on the front turn signals and the turn signals themselves, in addition to the horn. Here, we're checking that the rear running light works, as well as the brake lights for the front brake and for the rear brake. We're also checking the license plate light that lights up the license plate, as well as the rear turn signals. Next up, we'll be checking the clutch tension on this motorcycle. You want just a little bit of looseness at the end of the travel before you start getting tension on the clutch pull. If you need to adjust this, you simply loosen the lock nut where the clutch cable attaches to the lever. Then you can increase or decrease the tension using the adjuster. Moving on, we'll check the play in the throttle itself. There should be just a little bit of play before the throttle grip actually opens the throttle and you feel the tension there. If you need to adjust this, there is a 10mm lock nut that locks down on an 8mm adjuster, and then you turn the adjuster out to tighten the throttle pickup, or you can turn the adjuster in to give you a little bit more free play at the throttle grip. Once the throttle tension is properly set, you want to slide the cover back in place. Changing the oil on this motorcycle is a very simple procedure. The tools that you'll need here are a socket wrench, a 12mm socket for the oil drain plug, and an oil filter wrench that fits over the oil filter. On this oil change, I use the high flow HF204 oil filter. This bike also requires just about 3 quarts of 10W30 motorcycle specific oil. It's always good to have a fresh crush washer for the oil drain pan bolt, just in case you need to replace that. The first thing we do for the oil change is get the bike fully up to temperature. We place an oil drain pan underneath the motor itself. In this picture, you can see the 12mm head on the oil drain pan bolt that faces towards the rear of the bike. We're going to use the 12mm socket to loosen that. I recommend wearing nitrile gloves. This will protect your hands from the hot oil. Once the drain bolt is removed, the oil will drain out. While this is draining, it's a good idea to open the oil fill plug on the right side of the motor, and then it's time to remove the oil filter. To do this, I use an oil filter wrench. I also use a 4-inch extension on my socket, and I position the oil drain pan underneath the oil filter. Once that is removed, you want to use a clean paper towel to clean the seat where the new oil filter will seat against the engine. In this picture of the high flow filter, you can see that the oil filter O-ring is already pre-lubricated on this oil filter. If you use an oil filter that is not pre-lubricated, it's a good idea to dip your finger in some clean oil and to make sure that the rubber seal around the lip of the oil filter is wet with clean oil before you install that. Once the oil filter seal is lubricated, it's ready to go back on the bike, and you just want to be careful not to over tighten the oil filter when you install it on the bike. When you reinstall the new crush washer and drain bolt, you want to tighten the drain bolt to 22 foot-pounds of torque. It's time to add the engine oil. This engine takes 2.9 US quarts when you're changing the engine oil and the filter. The CB500F takes 10W30 weight motorcycle specific oil. Once the oil is added, you want to replace the oil fill cap and then start the bike up and let it idle for another 2 to 3 minutes, and then let the bike sit for another 2 to 3 minutes and check your oil level. and you want the engine oil level to be just underneath the upper mark on the sight glass. The final item that we'll check is the drive chain slack. You want to check this at several points to make sure that the tension is consistent over the length of the chain. To do this check, you want your bike in neutral, you want the motorcycle on its side stand on a level surface, and you check the slack in the lower half of the drive chain midway between the sprockets. The chain slack should be between 1 3/8 inches to 1 3/4 inches, or 35 to 45 millimeters. You also want to make sure that the chain is clean and lubricated at this time. Alright guys, that wraps up this video. If you own a CB500F or a CB500R or a CB500X, hopefully this video was helpful for you. This whole service took me under 2 hours to complete, and now I'm confident that the bike is safe to get out and ride and enjoy. As always, I hope you found this video entertaining and informative, and until next time, enjoy the ride.